Hey everybody, what's going on? It's your host Jessica M. Harris, and today we're going to be discussing how we don't want you to invite fear to your table of preparation in this season. Listen, if you're new here, this channel is all about your faith walk journey with Christ, all about entrepreneurship, family, life, love, and everything in between. So sit back, relax, and join in. Don't forget to like, share, and follow. Hit that bell above so you can be notified the next time a video gets dropped. All right, so we already know the fact that we have videos on the reasons as to why God will move you. We already went over that in a previous video. We already went over, what it will look like when God is getting ready to actually move you, right? That preparation part, how that looks and things of that nature. We already have those videos, which are great. If you haven't seen them, please go back and check them out because they're very useful and helpful for many of you right now. The part that I want to dive into right now is fear. Yes, y'all know that ugly, nasty looking spirit that tries to wheeze its way into anything that God has tried to speak over your life, right? That thing that tries to plant the seeds of doubt, anxiety, worry, and so much more. Yeah, today we're going to be discussing that little thing because that little thing will literally have you looking at the plan that God has gave you and believing the entire opposite. And we don't want that for you because at the end of the day, God's will for your life, I'm believing in it for you, shall come to pass. I believe when God says in his word, his words do not fail. That means whatever he has spoken, it's not going to fail. But you do have to not come into agreement with what the enemy is saying and instead speak life into what God has already spoken for you. So y'all know my journey I had last year when I went from my hometown. Well, not my hometown, but I went from home all the way to Texas, right? Y'all know how that was. It was interesting. It was a lot, right? But what I may not have shared so much of was the few weeks leading up to that. And that's what I want to dive into today. It's how fear tried to get a seat at this table. But let me tell you, God ushered that thing out. So one thing I definitely did at the beginning of my transition from the May into June phase just before I left was fast. Oh my goodness. Listen, if you are being led to fast right now, whether it's from social media, whether it's from, going to places, whether it's from food, please adhere to the Spirit of the Lord. If you are feeling led to fast and God is like, I want you to come off of your social media platforms. I want you to come off of, eating certain foods or eating foods in general. He may have you do a water only fast. He may have you do, an intermittent fast, whatever that fasting looks for you. Please adhere to it because he is doing something. I remember last year in May of 2022, God had me start off by doing a social media fast. I remember I had to come off of Facebook. I had to come off of Instagram. I didn't really use my YouTube like that at all. So this wasn't anything for me to jump off of. I honestly wasn't using it. So, but that's what he did, right? And I remember just feeling like the need to just not be there, the need to not, post anything, the need to not post videos, the need to not post blogs, the need to not post podcasts. Like I couldn't do anything. And it was a time where it was really just like getting me into a place to focus on him and the instructions that he was giving me. And that made a difference. Why? Because a few weeks later, that nasty little thing called fear, ooh-wee, that thing tried to creep in, y'all. He tried to get a sneak peek at the plans that God had for me. Let me tell you what he did. This thing sat there and got into my mind and was like, oh, you about to move? Okay, so where you about to live? Oh, you about to move? Well, how you about to do it? Oh, you about to move? Well, you ain't got a car out there. How you gonna get around? Oh, you about to move? Where you about to stay at? You don't know nobody there. Oh, you about to move? Oh, well, what about your kids? What they about to do? Right? Let me tell y'all, everything started coming at me and a hyperactivity of fear taking place right now. Why is the fear level on like 1,000 right now? And it was because I was this close to going to where God was taking me, because I was this close to being in position for where God was moving me to, for the pivot of my life, for the transition that was taking place. Fear was doing what it could to get a seat at the table. And let me tell you, baby, this thing was nudging me on my left and on my right. Well, yeah, my right and my left, to make some room for him to come in and be like, yo, so what's up? So let me talk to you about this doubt right quick that I'm about to insert in you. Let me go ahead and talk to you right quick about this anxiety that I want to give you. Let me talk to you right quick about how your money looking funny. Let me tell y'all, it was trying to come at me crazy. And I had to do what? Fast. I had to do what? Bind and rebuke that thing. I had to do what? Prophesy over the seed that God had given me, that it shall come to pass. I had to do what? Give it to God and surrender my thoughts about the trip, my thoughts about the transition, my thoughts about how it was going to come out. I had to surrender to him what I anticipated this would look like, so God could go ahead and correct my vision and my perspective on it. So this way I was no longer looking at it from a skewed perspective, but from the ways in which he wanted me to see it. In that moment, I had to go ahead and surrender my own expectations of how I wanted this trip to go. Right? Because remember, I saw Texas and I knew that God was sending me there, but the ways in which of how I was going to get there was a bit flimsy at this time. Because remember, I had decided to go to a conference that was in one city, not Dallas, but in a different city. And then I was going to take a plane from that city to Dallas. And that was like, okay, that's great and fantastic, but what would happen when you got in Dallas? So I was trying to write plans out. Okay, well, maybe I'll rent a vehicle, right? Maybe I'll do this with a vehicle or that with a vehicle. And it was just becoming too much of a headache. And then fear was creeping in, because fear was like, oh, well, how you gonna make money? How you gonna be traveling place to place? How you gonna carry your suitcases, right? How you gonna carry your luggage? And it was just annoying and it was frustrating. And it was like, all right, God, you're saying I can go to this state. Okay. I made plans to go to this conference. Wasn't that I felt like he was telling me to go to the conference, but I had wanted to go to this conference. So I had said, you know what? How about this, God? And I remember it was a Saturday, because I remember my thoughts were on 10. Fear was just doing the most. And I was at my wit's end, because I knew that God was pressing me to go, but it was like too many thoughts taking place. I remember I got into a place where the word scream is what came to mind when I was thinking about this last night. And I probably did scream. I honestly probably went to my car at some point, because my car was my place where I could go and just really talk to God. And I'm pretty sure I probably screamed and was like, ah, because it was just that much. It was just too much. And I remember in doing so, it was kind of like, enough is enough. I bind and rebuke the spirit of fear. I bind and rebuke the spirit of anxiety. I bind and rebuke the spirit of worry. I come against it right now. I come out of agreement right now. God, I repent for it right now. And all these things. And I was going at fear like crazy. I was coming at the enemy for everything that he was doing to me, because I was frustrated at that time. And when I did, everything came up out of me. Like, all of it. I'm talking about everything. I'm talking about whatever was inside from fear and whatever else. When I screamed, it was a release. It was like, ah, y'all. It was just like, wow. And I felt so much better, to the point where I said, God, this is my ex. If you are sending me here, can I bring my car with me? So I would have an ability to move place to place with ease, because I knew that if I had my vehicle, then that means that I had ways to get around town without having to rent, right? Because rentals cost money, and I didn't have a job at that time that was secured to be doing that. And it kind of felt dumb in my mind to have a vehicle up here but not have anything down there, but my vehicle could actually technically do it. Maybe, right? I'm not sure. And I remember thinking, like, I've never made a drive like this before. I knew my car had just got work on it. I knew that it was in a good condition at that moment to make some moves. I didn't know how it was going to do when I got there, but I knew it could get me there potentially, right? And I remember when I asked God that question, after repenting, after binding and rebuking, after screaming and releasing all of that yucky, nucky stuff that was there, that yucky, icky stuff that just needed to come out, right? After I did all that releasing, I finally said, God, can I bring my car? Will you allow me to? Will it be something that you will let me do so I can be able to get around? I remember asking God, like, I just need a way. And I remember when I did, I felt the peace of God come upon me. And it was at that moment and at that time that I knew that God was giving me the grace to bring my vehicle. And at that time, all that fear, all that rah stuff that was plaguing me for the last week and change had dissipated. Whatever that spirit of fear that was coming in such a monstrous way was just like poof, bye. And I was so grateful. And I share this because it may happen. Now, the enemy knows that God has, something for you, right? And this is why it's so important to be rooted in God. This is why it's so important to lead a consecrated lifestyle. This is why it's so important to not just fast and not just repent, but to literally start making those changes in your life, removing things, right? Coming out of agreement with things, renouncing stuff, breaking off contracts, stop dilly-dallying and stuff that's of the world and everything else in between. That's why it's so important, because then it gives the enemy, it doesn't give him any room. Right? If I'm not dipping and dallying inside the world, the enemy doesn't have room to come and join this table because I'm not making space. I'm closing up the gaps. I'm closing up the gaps with the Lord, right? God is sealing the gaps, sealing the holes in the foundation. And that's what's so needed in this hour of transition, and not just in the transitional period, but your life afterwards, right? Even the preparation part of the right now. All of that needs to be sealed up right now. All of that needs to be in a space where you are with God and seeking him and allowing him in to fill up what is needed right now. All of that needs to be a you and God thing right now. That being said, in the midst of that whole journey, I also had to be quiet when it came to sharing. I had to be quiet when it came to speaking about my transition, about my move. Now, be Holy Spirit led here, because for me, the way I felt about it when it was happening for me in specific at that time, I wasn't given a green light that I felt to share. It felt like move in silence, baby girl. And a part of that, I got to see why. Because not everybody knows the vision that God has for you. Not everybody can see the thing that God is doing in your life. And I'm telling you now, when I was telling their dad this, now me and him obviously have had to have conversations about this part. And y'all know the story back in November of 2021, he filed for custody and things of that nature and whatnot. And then he did it again in 2022, filing for custody. But right, it tripped up that type of situation for me. It also went ahead and caused people who was in his family, like his mom, for example, to say things that were not the nicest when it came to me moving out, right? And it wasn't that she didn't believe in God, but she didn't understand that that's what God was doing for me. She couldn't understand why God would have me just leave and just go to a place that I had never been to before. And that's the part, right? So people who may not have that sight that God has given you, they're going to implant things that are not what God is saying. And that's why it's important not to come into agreement. There were things that she said that were the opposite of what God said. And I would have to bind and rebuke that too. Why? Because I knew that God said that this was him. I knew that God said to go and do it. So anything that was the opposite, I had to bind and rebuke it, even from people who you may love. It may come from them too. And I share that part because I don't want you feeling like, oh, well, they're my family. They have to support me. No. They may not. Your support may not come from family. It may not come from friends. It may literally come from random strangers, to be honest. It may just come from you and God at the moment. And you have to be understanding and forgiving, right? Because it's something that God has to work on with them. And sometimes there's a season for things where they may not know right now and understand at this moment, and later down the line they may gain better understanding of it. And that's a God in them type of moment, right? There's things that we can't control when it comes to how other people will respond. And I had to learn that the interesting way, right? I can't control their emotions. I can't control how people respond. But anyways, I also share that part with you because if God is leading you to be quiet in this hour, not to share too much, not to say too much, take heed to whatever God is telling you. And like everything, right? Take all of this back to God. I probably should have said at the beginning of the video, but yes, take everything to God and allow God to confirm what is for you. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to be in a situation where you're like, okay, well, do I do it? Do I not do it? Listen, God is not the author of confusion, right? God doesn't bring us a spirit of what is it called? Double-mindedness. That's not God. That's the enemy. The enemy wants you to be confused. The enemy wants to create doubt. The enemy wants to create fear. He wants to create, stagnancy in areas where God is saying you can flow, right? So this is why it's really important to adhere to whatever it is that God is telling you to do. But in that being said, you're gonna have to stop doing the things that God has pulled you from. So if God is telling you to get rid of stuff, get rid of it. If God is telling you to stop being in certain circles, stop doing it. If God is telling you to, leave well enough alone, leave well enough alone. Because there's a reason why he's doing it. He is literally bridging the gap of stuff that is taking place in your life right now, and he is sealing up cracked foundations. Don't go sit in there creating room where God is already sealing stuff and shutting a door on. So that's probably a whole different video. But anyways, yes. So that is my 2 cents on this conversation. I hope this is helping somebody. Let me know in the comments if this is helpful for you and things like that. All right. And lastly, if you are someone who would like to support me or my business in some way, shape, or form, I encourage you to visit Ignite Your Glow in the description box below and go ahead and grab a book. There's journals. We also offer coaching services as well as an accountability group that is starting up on May 27th. So if you are interested in any of those things, I highly encourage you to take a look at our website and go ahead and tap into some of our services. Have an amazing day and see you next time.